Hello, everyone. Can everyone see and hear me without any issue? Excellent. Well, it's our second last lecture today. I cannot believe how quickly the time has gone. Summer classes always seem to pass very quickly to me, but this one, I don't know, this one seemed to go by even faster. I don't know if any of you found found it to be the same, but it's certainly my experience. And of course, we're going to talk about dreams, which is the most popular topic from the poll. So thank you again to everybody who voted in that. I actually had I don't know the exact numbers, but I did have quite a lot of participation in that poll, so that's really good. I like to see that. Unfortunately, participation in the live lectures has been rather low this term. I'm not really sure why. It's not as low as last year in any case, but that aside, nothing I can really do about that. I'm just happy to see that there was a lot of input on that poll. So without further ado, let's talk about dreams and dreaming and other associated phenomena like out-of-body experiences and sleep paralysis. Yeah, Martha, you're right. I was thinking about that. A lot of students have a lot of stuff to juggle, right? Part-time job or even just working on other coursework. And because I make the recordings of the lectures available, a lot of students do just take the opportunity to kind of keep caught up on their own time. And I understand that. I guess I just sort of miss uh, more lively interactions in the lecture. But, that's it is what it is. I'm not mad about it. It is what it is, right? Um, so I think it's really cool to talk about dreams and again, other associated phenomena because they're an example of a phenomenon which, for quite a long time, arguably most of human history, and even to a significant extent now in the 21st century, dreams were considered mysterious, um, perhaps something associated with the divine or the supernatural, but which now, thanks to tools of psychology and neuroscience and some of the other cognitive sciences, we can study dreams. And by doing so, we have the opportunity to learn quite a bit about ourselves. You got to think, Holly, about you mean the lecture stuff? What is it that Wittgenstein wrote in the philosophical investigations? Something along the lines of not wanting his work to spare people the trouble of thinking. Kind of reminds me of that. I'm no Wittgenstein, not even close, but um, I'm glad that I'm glad the material gets you thinking, if that's what you mean. Oh yeah, when it comes to the in-class participation, don't sweat it, right? Before just to allay any worries there, when I was an undergraduate, I barely spoke in class. Most of you who are here are participating to an extent that I would have been very hesitant to do as an undergrad. I know that might not seem that way now because I'm up here lecturing and I'm a bit of a blabbermouth now. According to some of my reviews on ratemyprofessor.com, I am a chatterbox. So don't worry about it, It's all good. It's not a dig against if I want more participation, it's not a dig against you guys. It's just, it is what it is, right? But how can we use the tools of the sciences, especially the cognitive sciences, to understand more about ourselves by studying dreams? I don't mean, or at least I don't specifically mean that by studying dreams we can understand more about ourselves, in terms of interpreting them. Because I do think there's a lot of woo-woo out there when it comes to dream interpretation, right? If you walk into any bookstore and you go to the philosophy section, which sadly, at least the last time I was in the chapters, or the Indigo or whatever it's called in the Rito Center, the philosophy section and the New Age section are kind of just the same section. A lot of the books you find there might be on dream interpretation, and a lot of it doesn't really have that much basis in fact. That's not to say that I don't think it can be productive. It can be. It can't be productive to study your own dreams, right? I think you can probably glean something about your mood, your mental states by paying attention to the sorts of things you're dreaming about. But there's no straightforward like, okay, you dreamed of this and that means this, right? There's no straightforward systematic way to interpret dreams, right? But you might get to know what an anxiety dream looks like to you. For example, one theme that seems to be kind of common is dreams of people's teeth falling out, right? I don't have those myself, or at least if I do, I don't recall them. But one anxiety dream that I have when I tend to dream about this when I'm uh, undergoing a period of stress. Like maybe towards the end of a busy semester and I've got all kinds of marking and I'm worried about deadlines and I'm having trouble relaxing. I'll have a strange dream where I am an adult. I'm the same age I am now, but I'm late for a guest appearance in my old high school band. Right? I was in my high school, we had a rock band instead of a quote unquote regular band. It was a music program. You earned music credits for it. The music teacher was the musical director, and it was huge, right? We had a full rhythm section, horns, four vocalists, full student run stage crew. It was really cool, really neat opportunity. But I'll often have a dream where I'm like supposed to play with this band, and I get there and I haven't learned the songs, or I don't have my guitar, or I don't have my outfit or something. And I don't know why it's always that, but I tend to dream about that when I'm under a period of extreme stress. So, if I have that dream, I say to myself, gonna have to do something about managing my stress a little bit better, right? So sure, there are things like that, but there aren't right by studying your dreams, you're not really going to come up with like a systematic means of interpreting them that applies to everybody, right? That's what I think. Oh, Martha, that's an interesting one. I used to have a similar dream. I'll often have this, not often, but when I do have this dream of falling and waking up before you hit the ground, it's usually when I am just falling asleep, maybe a nap, or I'm nodding off in a vehicle. I'm taking the bus or the train, I'm nodding off. And I have this, I remember a few instances where I was not falling out of a window, but I was kind of walking along looking down at the ground and I trip over a crack in the pavement, say, and I fall forward. And right before I hit the ground, I wake up suddenly like, whoa, right? Sometimes this is also associated with something called a myoclonic jerk, which is where you're falling asleep and your brain suddenly wakes you up. Uh, Not really sure the reasons why the brain does this, but if you find yourself falling asleep and suddenly, wow, you're thrown awake like that, that could be a myoclonic jerk. It's nothing to worry about, by the way. If you have this, it's nothing to worry about. But sometimes you might have a dream like Martha's associated with a myoclonic jerk, and you wake up like, whoa, really suddenly before you hit the ground in your dream, right? Jay says 90% of my dreams are anxiety dreams, and they're very obvious. No need to them. Yeah, sometimes it's pretty straightforward, right? But sometimes it's not. And that I think motivated a lot of what Freud has to say about dreams, which we're going to talk a little bit about today. But by studying dreams with science, we can do a couple of things noted by Blackmore in the reading that I've made available today, her chapter on dreams and hypnotic states. By understanding how dreams are realized in the brain, and by looking at the difference between the brain when it's dreaming and when it's awake, we might be able to understand more about the neural correlates of consciousness. So, a couple things I want to clarify here. One is this notion of realization, right? In fact, I should really have this italicized and bolded here. When I say something is realized in the brain, I mean that the brain is realizing or implementing mental states. There's kind of limits to how useful the following analogy is, but if you want to think about it like this, if the mind is the software, the brain is the hardware. That's not really how it works, right? Of course, you don't have software installed in your brain. Your brain isn't running a program. Um, but you can think of it like that. Like on your computer or your smartphone, there's the hardware, and then the software is implemented on the hardware. The software works because of the way it's implemented or realized by the hardware. So dreams are, and I know I'm getting ahead of myself a little bit, but dreams are these conscious experiences, more to a certain extent, conscious, but nonetheless, they are experiences we have during REM sleep when we're sleeping, and they're realized by activity in the brain. And we'll talk more about how that happens today. Likewise, when you are having an experience of the world when you're awake, that experience is realized by the brain. So I can look at my coffee cup. I'm going to throw some neuroscience at you here real quick, but don't panic. There's not going to be a pop quiz. But when I look at this coffee cup, I have a visual experience of the coffee cup. I perceive its color, its shape. That's happening in my occipital cortex, right? The visual areas begin in the occipital lobes, which are on the anterior part of your brain, the back, or the posterior. Or they're on the back of your brain. Sorry, it's been a while since I've taught a neuroscience class. Um, to identify the coffee cup, I have to employ other pathways in the brain. So if I look at it and say, oh, coffee cup, that's because information from my visual areas is reaching my temporal areas, which have to do with memory. If I reach out and grab the coffee cup, that has to do with sort of premotor and motor activity in my parietal areas, which are kind of on the top. Temporal areas are on the sides, where your temples are, parietal top, frontal at the front, occipital at the back, right? So seeing the coffee cup, having a visual experience, identifying it, reaching out and picking it up, all of these things are realized by different areas of the brain working in concert with one another. So maybe by studying the difference between dreaming and waking brains, we can identify some of the neural correlates of consciousness. That is the neural machinery that's implicated when we have conscious experiences. And that would be cool. Because consciousness, as Daniel Dennett famously remarked, is just about the last surviving mystery. We don't know how it works. There's a lot of nonsense out there on the internet um, claiming that scientists have figured it out, um, but we have not yet. We understand quite a bit about the neural correlates of consciousness, but we don't understand why red is red, right? Why does redness have this particular phenomenal feel to it? Why does blue have a different one, right? Why? That's what we're not sure about. These are kind of related to what David Chalmers calls the hard problem of consciousness, and that is understanding subjective conscious experience using the objective tools of science. Maybe by studying dreams, we can understand a little more about that. We're not going to solve it by looking exclusively at dreams, but might understand a little bit more about it. Um, no, actually. Holly, can you tell us a bit about that? I might know it if I hear more about it. I'm not sure. The name and well, the Lisa Feldman Barrett, that sounds familiar in constructionism. Oh, how emotions are made. Oh, okay. Does she, so tell me about her theory of emotion. I teach a class on the emotions, so I'm curious to hear I'm curious to hear more about this. You can tell me now or you can send me an email later. It's up to you. But is anyone else interested? Oh, don't be nervous. I don't want to put you on the spot either, Holly. So, don't worry. Don't stress. Um, but emotions are states we tend to be conscious of, not always, right? But emotional experiences are conscious states. Sometimes we're not 100% sure why we're feeling what we're feeling, right? I mean, it's pretty straightforward, right? If I was walking around on one of my little walks in the neighborhood and I saw a bear charging at me and I become afraid, it doesn't take much to put two and two together, right? Oh, well, I'm afraid because there's a bear charging me, right? Fear is associated with danger. Fear is how organisms represent these dangerous threats. And fear also motivates us to take action by fighting the bear or fleeing the bear, for example. Um, then again, it can be less straightforward, right? Like I said in the lecture on the uncanny, um, an emotion like anxiety, its intentionality, what it's about, is usually a little bit less clear, and that's because the intentional object of anxiety is uncertainty about something, right? So you might be anxious and not know why. Well, maybe it's because you're uncertain about something, right? So Holly says all experiences created by the brain via statistics and less sensory. There's a feedback loop for correction, but ultimately the brain makes most things up, fills in the gaps to save time and energy. You are creating your world as you go, more so than responding to it. Very interesting. You know what that does remind me of is, well, it reminds me of a few aspects of the debate over consciousness in philosophy and neuroscience. The brain does seem to do some filling in. For example, all of us in each of our eyes have a foveal blind spot. Um, the fovea is the bit at the back of the retina that has the highest concentration of rods and cones. It's where we have the greatest visual acuity, kind of in the center of our vision in both eyes, right? But in the middle of that, there's a gap because the optic nerves or the optic tracts come out of there and go and become the optic nerves and flow back into the occipital areas, the primary visual cortex. But we don't have the experience of blind spots in our eyes. There are things you can do to find your blind spot, little images you can print out and hold up to your face at a certain distance from your eye that will reveal your foveal blind spot. But we don't seem to experience the blind spot when we're just out and about perceiving the world. And so the debate is whether the brain is filling that in for us, right? The feedback loop stuff, yes, very straightforward. There are one thing that Blackmore talks about in other chapters of this book is the fact that we have these corticothalamic loops, uh, circuits that run from different areas to the cortex to the thalamus and back, um, such that the brain is kind of always, the brain is dynamically representing the world, right? Not just making a model of it that's incredibly rich and detailed. It's doing so dynamically. Yeah, Will, it can be tricky. You kind of have to get the hang of it, right? You kind of have to get the hang of it. But check out in Blackmore's book, she has a little thing that you can actually print out and do it with on your own. Will's done it in class, but if anyone else wants to do it, do it. It's really cool. Yeah, and Holly is absolutely right about the brain being predictive. The brain is like a prediction machine. And that relates to some of the things we've spoken about in this class, right? Right? Go back to that Pleistocene era example where I'm hunting and gathering out in the forest, and I see or I hear a stick snapping, or I think I see a figure in the woods. My brain is going to predict that that is alive rather than just inanimate forces. Why? Because it's beneficial to me and my fitness as an organism, right? So absolutely, the brain is predictive. This also sounds to me, again, I haven't read this book, but this also does kind of sound to me a little bit like an active perception. An active perception is the idea that perception is not a passive process, it's an active process. It's a result of actively engaging with the world, not just sitting back and having everything come in and representing a big, highly detailed representation of the world. Yeah, yeah, the false positive, false negative thing, exactly. Like the adaptive stuff. But yeah, you're absolutely right about all of that. Sounds like an interesting book. Martha's going to read it. Very good. If you can't get your hands on it, well, Blackmore's book is a great book on consciousness. A lot of good stuff there. Um, oh, that's fantastic. I love when you get a really good book and it makes an impact on you, you know? That's great. So all this is to say, like, yeah, we could understand a lot more about the neural correlates of consciousness by looking at the differences between dreaming and waking brains. We might also be able to better clarify what we mean when we talk about conscious states or conscious experiences and the unconscious. So, and I think this is really what one of the takeaways that we're going to get today. But what are dreams? Here's some answers. Years ago, Google Dictionary, don't use dictionaries as sources, mind you, but Google Dictionary defined it as a series of thoughts, images, and sensations occurring in a person's mind during sleep. Or Wikipedia, don't use Wikipedia as a source. Uh, but a dream is a succession of images, ideas, emotions, and sensations that usually occur involuntarily in the mind during certain stages of sleep, namely REM sleep. And most of the definitions that you'll see in, I don't know, psychology textbooks will agree with those. And most dreams occur in REM sleep. REM is short for rapid eye movement. Um, when we are in REM sleep, the body is mostly paralyzed. Uh, your eyes move, your heart and lungs will function okay, and you might see some muscle twitches um, if you're observing somebody who's sleeping. But they're not going to get up and walk around and act out their dreams. The reason for that is because owing to certain changes in the brain during REM sleep, motor signals don't leave from the brainstem and travel to the rest of the body. Your brain is also very active when you dream. Your brain is nearly as active as it is when you're awake in the world. If you were to give somebody an EEG or an fMRI when they're awake and compare it to one when they're asleep and dreaming, you would observe a lot of the same kinds of activity, and we'll explore the reasons why as we go. You'd see, for example, thalamocortical loop activity, which is associated or is thought to be associated with consciousness. You'd see activity in various parts of the brain. If I was dreaming of if I'm dreaming and having a visual experience, you're going to see activity in the visual cortex, for example. The brain represents your inner world when you're dreaming the same way it represents the external world when you're awake. So we should expect to see the brain being highly active during REM sleep, just like it is when we're awake. There's one important difference, though, and that is that there seems to be less activity in the dorsolateral prefrontal cortex, or the DLPFC. Why is that interesting? Well, the dorsolateral prefrontal cortex is associated with executive control. So it's important for paying attention, maintaining attention. It's important for action selection. It's important for critically evaluating things. Whenever you're thinking hard about something, you're probably employing your dorsolateral prefrontal cortex. But we don't see high activity in the dorsolateral prefrontal cortex, not as high as when we are awake, when we're dreaming. That could explain why we don't realize our dreams are so absurd while we're dreaming. All kinds of crazy stuff happens when we're dreaming, and we just kind of accept it, right? Like I've had lots of dreams where there's weird stuff happening, and I think to myself, like, oh yeah, makes sense, right? I often dream of this house. It's an ever-changing dream house with it seems to have infinite rooms, but I always identify it as the same house. Even if it's in a different building, even if the internal configuration is different. And so maybe I walk into my dream house and I'm like, oh yeah, this is that dream house. And oh, the rooms are all different. Well, I guess it's because it's my dream house. And I will not then realize that I'm dreaming, right? That's like a failure of my critical faculties to kick in and make me realize, hey, your dream house is different every time because it's not real and you're having a dream, right? Oh, interesting. Yeah. I've talked to other students who have like consistent locations in their dreams. Mine is this house, and I'm usually in it from the outside. The design seems to be based off of my maternal grandfather's old home. So when my mom and her family they came to Canada from England in the 70s, and they lived in Oakville. And then they moved up to Northern Ontario, a place called Chudley, above, not directly above Sudbury, but kind of between North Bay and Sudbury, up north in the middle of nowhere. I mean, there are people that live there, but the township to this day still does not have electricity. And what he did is there was an old barn on that property. It used to be owned by a guy named guy whose last name was Dwyer. So they got this property, had an old barn, a whole bunch of old broken down workshops, a lot of history there, like old tools from the old logging industry and the fur trade. I remember he had a flintlock musket that he had just found in this place. And so the barn, they renovated half of it to be like a big giant home, and it has almost like this great hall sort of place in the middle. And my dream house always seems to start from there. And then the other rooms are like they're like infinite other rooms that branch out from there. Very interesting. I guess it's because it's a childhood memory that is still very clear to me of being up there. Jamal has a dream house. I have a house that's identical to the house I grew. Oh, okay, so that's kind of like my grandfather's barn. A hospital and a grocery store too. Yeah, that's very cool. And Zach also, recurring stories, places, and characters in my dreams. Yeah, oh, yeah, you don't recognize it in the dream, but after you wake up, maybe because your dorsolateral prefrontal cortex is not as active as when you're awake, right? These are the stages of sleep. And we go through this cycle, this this alternating sort of deep sleep, REM sleep cycle, a few times throughout the night. So you start from wakefulness, and you might have a very, very short dream as you're falling asleep. You also, in between sleep and wakefulness, you might observe what's called hypnagogic imagery. Hypnagogic comes from the Greek it means leading into sleep. And you might notice this when you're falling asleep, you've got your eyes closed and you start to see things. They're not full-on dreams, but they might be like geometric patterns or weird lights dancing around. That's called hypnagogic imagery, leading into sleep. And then you might get a very brief dream, and then you start to descend through the stages of sleep into deep sleep or slow wave sleep. It's called slow wave sleep because when we look at people's brains who are sleeping in the sleep lab with an EEG, the brain waves are slow. Brain waves, by the way, are not waves emitted from your brain. They are a measure of electrical activity at the scalp. And that electrical activity is caused by dendritic activity in your brain. So neurons talking to one another. The brain is still active, but it's quieted down when you're in deep sleep or slow wave sleep. Then you'll rise up into REM sleep, and that is active sleep or rapid eye movement sleep. You'll have a dream, and unless you wake up from that dream, you probably won't remember it. You go back to sleep, another REM cycle, sleep, another REM cycle, deep sleep, another REM cycle throughout the night. The REM periods get longer, and the deep phase of sleep gets less deep and shorter as the night goes on. That's why it's really important to get a really good night's sleep. You want to get an average of 8 hours. Some people can manage with less, some people need more. I myself need a more. I don't know why. Um, I actually, I hope this isn't too personal. Um, but I have been thinking about making an appointment with a sleep specialist. Because I seem to require a lot of sleep. And I've also, since I was young, I've had dark circles under my eyes. Um, oh, I'm going to embarrass myself right now. But if you look at Josh from the eighth grade, I don't know if you can see, you can still see there, um, dark circles under my eyes. So I kind of wonder whether I might have a sleep disorder. This is grade 8 graduation. Look at that collar. It was not the 70s, guys. It was, in fact, uh, I believe the year 2000. Um, but holy moly, I could fool you into thinking it was the 70s or the 80s or something. But I've always had those dark circles. Anyway, don't screen grab that and show everybody. Um, and so, maybe I need more sleep because I might have some kind of sleep apnea or something. I don't know. I'm gonna see somebody about it. Some people just need more sleep. I don't know much about the science on this, but I've heard that neurodivergent people tend to need more sleep. So people with ADHD or on the autism spectrum tend to require a bit more sleep. Could be because of a difference in how their brains work. Um, oh, Martha, your daughter's the same. Yeah. Yeah, always tired even though she was asleep for 10 hours or more. Yeah, sleep apnea, that'll do it. I'm glad you got that figured out. Um, that's good because yeah, a lack of sleep can really take a toll on you. It's important to sleep very well. You can't tell the difference between me this. Well, I guess I'm more hairy yeah, on the face, but yeah. Or do you mean tell the difference between the 70s, 80s, and 90s? I guess in the 70s, big collars were a thing, and I just always liked a big shirt collar. Um, Zach says, my dad can go days without sleeping and has been able to do so since he was in his teens and is usually able to function at full capacity with very limited sleep. That's very impressive. I remember the longest I ever went without sleep. It must have been around 50 hours or so. And it was actually when I was working on my master's thesis and I had a couple of chapters due and I just stayed up and worked continuously with little tiny breaks until it was done. I'm never doing that again. Do dark circles mean you don't get enough sleep? I've never noticed a difference in the circles depending on how much I sleep. Some people just have them, right? I might just look like this. I might not have a sleep disorder. But I have to say, like, I'm not that kind of doctor, right? So I'm not sure. I don't think I could really I don't think I could it's a good question, but I don't think I can really do a very good job of answering it. Um Sonati had a sleep study done once. Yeah, that's kind of why I've hesitated to do one, because I really like sleeping in my own bed, and I don't want to be in a strange bed in a strange building covered in wires, right? Because I'm like, how am I even going to fall asleep? Like, I go to the sleep lab, you're going to study my sleep, but I've got an EEG on my head and galvanometers strapped all over my limbs and everything. How am I going to sleep? I'm not going to fall asleep, right? So that's a worry for me. Oh, Leo, so an anecdotal confirmation. Yeah, so Leo, so you're on the spectrum, you have ADHD, you need a ton of sleep. I know my partner is neurodivergent, and she definitely needs a full night's sleep. I don't think she sleeps more than the average, but she definitely needs a solid 8 hours. Um, Zach, I can function on 5 to 6 hours without too much issue, but I can also sleep. Yeah, yeah, I know what you mean. I like if I have to get up and I don't have a full night's sleep, I'm okay. Um, and if I sleep a lot, I'm okay. But if I only get 7 or 8 hours, it's generally I'm kind of drowsy all day. Yeah. So those are the stages of sleep. So that, what this means is that you dream multiple times a night. And sometimes we do actually get reports of dreams in non-REM sleep, but these are not like vivid visual dreams. They're reported as being more thought-like. And we get this, we have this information because in sleep studies, we can wake people up, obviously, at different times of the night. So if I'm in a sleep lab, and somebody says that somebody wants to see what I'm dreaming, they can wake me up right before a REM period is ending and ask me to recall my dreams from REM sleep. They could also wake me up when I'm in deep sleep and have me report on whatever I remember. When we do that, we find that the dreams are much less vivid, right? They're less experiential and more thought-like. They're much harder to recall than dreams that occur during REM sleep. Then again, oftentimes, unless a dream makes a strong impression on you or you're making an effort to recall your dreams, it can be very difficult to remember your dreams, even your REM dreams, right? And lots of other animals, I should say, also dream. It's not just humans. No, no, not exactly, Lena. It might be more difficult to wake somebody up, but you can certainly wake somebody up from deep sleep. Think about it like this, right? It wouldn't be very adaptive if you couldn't be awakened from deep sleep. Because what if something is happening that's important, right? What if there's some kind of disaster? Um, you got to wake up. If you don't wake up, you might be dead, right? So you can certainly wake up from deep sleep. Might be a little more tricky, but yeah, it's definitely doable. Um, yeah, other animals dream. So who has pets? I've got my two cats here. My partner's got the dog up in North Bay. She's taking care of the pupper. But I'll often observe all of them when they're dreaming. And you can tell when your furry friend is dreaming because they twitch a little bit, right? You can tell. Oh, they'll run, Leo? Interesting. I've had my dog wake herself up from a dream by barking. It was the funniest thing. She was asleep on the couch having a dream and was doing, like Holly says, the breathy woofs, like and then all of a sudden "Run, run, 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 run," huh? And looked around confused, like, wow, where am I? Like, no idea what was happening. It was the cutest thing ever. And my cats will often dream, when my cats are in deep sleep, they're very still, they're snoring. And when they dream, they twitch, and you can see their respiration isn't as regular. It gets more rapid and irregular. You can see the eye movement, you can see the paws twitching. And that illustrates the sort of REM paralysis, right? Because if you weren't paralyzed, you're not paralyzed like in the same sense as if you've had a spinal cord injury, but you're paralyzed enough that you're not going to get up and act out your dreams. Because that also could be quite dangerous, right? Imagine I have a dream that I'm just walking around, but I'm up and about acting it out. I could bump into something. I could walk out the door and fall off my balcony, right? That would be bad. So that's why that's why we seem to have evolved REM paralysis. It's not just mammals who dream. A lot of birds also dream. Interestingly, dolphins don't dream, or they don't seem to. That's because dolphins, one half of their brain sleeps at a time. Do spiders dream? That's a good question. Um, I have no idea. I wonder if spiders are neurologically sophisticated enough to dream. Not sure. Do you ask because you have a pet spider? Oh, because some people do, right? They have like tarantulas and stuff. Maybe if somebody has a pet tarantula, they might try to observe whether the spider dreams. Would be interesting. Oh, you've seen sleeping spiders. Yeah. I have not actually. I have not seen a sleeping spider. Only when they're alive. But I like to leave them alone because they get the nasty bugs that I don't want. Same with my house centipedes. If I see a house centipede, I leave it alone because I know he's on the lookout for the bugs I don't want. So how do sleepers know their way around while unconscious? Yes. Okay, so sleepwalking or somnambulism actually happens in a different stage of sleep. So it's not when you're sleepwalking, you're not dreaming. You're not getting up and acting out your dreams. But it's technically a sleep disorder where you're up and you're ambulatory, but you're not conscious. And yeah, there are quite interesting tales of what sleepwalkers get up to. There is a medical disorder called sexsomnia. Maybe anybody who's seen that TV show House remembers the episode about the sexsomniac. And sexsomnia is exactly what it sounds like. It's sleepwalking, but what you're doing is not walking, if you get my drift. Yeah, Leo's seen it. Uh, it's rare, but it is a real disorder. So you might initiate amorous activities with your partner while you're unconscious if you have this sleep disorder. Oh, I'm not familiar with that one, Holly, but I'll have to check it out. Um, there was also a very interesting case of a man who was sleepwalking. If I'm not mistaken, this occurred in Canada, but this man killed somebody while sleepwalking, and he was found not criminally responsible. Jamal?
Yeah, I was actually going to type out that it's RV Parks 1992. It's a case I've studied in other classes because it's very important, like legally in Canada, for establishing this defense because it's the first time this ever happened.
Yeah.
But it's not one person. He drove and then killed his parents-in-laws.
Oh, it was the both of them. Oh my
It was the both
goodness.
of them. And he then woke up during the murder, like within the hours when he was killing one of them, and stopped what he was doing, drove to the police station, turned himself in after.
Huh. Wow.
It
But
is a really interesting case to read if anyone wants to actually read legal documents. I think it's more interesting some of the ones other ones I've read, decisions I've read. But
yeah,
yeah,
wow.
it is really, really cool.
Jamal, could you share some of those maybe you can share something about those legal documents on the Discord server in case
Like,
anyone's interested?
I mean, you can just find the case online on Canly, like it's publicly available knowledge.
Oh, it is? Oh, okay. I don't know how case
Oh, yeah, Canadian case law is public knowledge in Canada, and they're all uploaded to a database called Canly.
okay.
Pretty much every case you'll find is there, unless it's protected for whatever reason.
Nice. Okay, well, I'll have to look into this more. But yeah, what a wild case, right? Like, um, but it just goes to show you, somnambulism can be no joke. Um, let's see. You might also have the sense that you don't dream very much, or perhaps even not at all. But that's not true, right? As we've seen, we all dream multiple times every night. I used to encounter this. I remember, because in high school I got really interested in lucid dreaming, and I had like a friend group, and we were all kind of like trying it out. And then other people would kind of join in and be like, "Oh, I can't do that. I never dream." And then my little nerdy high school self would be like, "Actually, we dream multiple times every night." And I'd go on and on about REM cycles and stuff. And yeah, so if you have the sense that you don't dream, it could be actually that you're just not remembering your dreams because dreams are hard to recall, right? Oh, Lena, is that the same? Is that the same person? Oh, a different okay, a different person. Yeah. But yeah, I mean, that case is pretty well, not to say the other case is tricky, but that's pretty tricky, right? Because is he actually is he really did he assault somebody intentionally, or was he really experiencing an episode of somnambulism, right? Um that's very tricky. Um, so we all dream multiple times a night, every night, and your dreams, because your REM stages get longer as the night goes on, your dreams become longer as the night goes on. You just probably aren't remembering them. You stand a pretty good chance of remembering your dream if you've been woken up in the middle of the dream. But if you're just waking up in the morning, this often happens to me as I kind of drift into wakefulness, rather like how I drift off to sleep. And by the time I'm awake and aware, I've kind of already forgotten what I was dreaming about, right? Um, if you didn't have dreams, it probably wouldn't be very good for you. As we'll see, researchers like Alan Hobson think that dreams are probably pretty important for memory consolidation. Um, in any case, if you don't sleep, most of us, if we don't sleep, we can face serious mental and physical health issues. Um, I think this is evidenced by the fact that deprivation was used as a form of torture, right? During the Cold War, the CIA would use deprivation. The Soviets used sleep deprivation. Um, um, yeah, and I've also known people who do the BMQ. They're in the Canadian Forces and they do that like courses like the basic military qualification course. And you have to go on like a field exercise and you have to stay awake the whole time. I'm not sure exactly how long it is. But it's a long time, right? It's long enough that by the time you're done, you're super tired, right? Because you're not just staying awake, you're like out there in the wilderness with all your gear and everything. Um, 1 week. You have to stay awake for the whole week? Or is that just how long the course is? Gosh, I hope they don't make you stay up for 1 week. Well, in any case, I had a friend who did this. Oh, okay. So you can catch a few Z's, but don't get caught, right? I guess it's like a soft week, right? Like, okay, you're on the watch, I'm gonna sleep. Then in 4 hours you switch off. Yeah. But that's still really hard to do, right? That is tough. Yeah, but I had a friend who I remember when he came back from doing his BMQ, he had been up for like, I don't know, a couple of days straight. Um, and yeah, he was pretty tired. That's not, just to be clear, that's not torture, right? I'm not saying the forces tortures its members. I'm not saying that. I'm saying that, it. it has sleep deprivation has been used as torture, but in a course like that, I mean, that is to make sure that you meet your basic qualifications to serve in the forces, right? That you can stay up and still function if you need to, if you're out on a mission or something, right? Why is it hard to remember our dreams? I think that's a really interesting question. One idea is that it might be maladaptive, might actually be maladaptive, right? So remember in this example, most animals dream, but if we remembered dreams as real experiences, we might start getting things wrong about the way the world is. If we're a prey species, and we dream that all the predators have gone and wake up and remember that, well, we might not take care to avoid predators, right? That's one possibility. Um, Maybe we don't remember our dreams for similar reasons to why we don't act out our dreams, I guess is another way of putting this. It could be dangerous. It wouldn't be beneficial to us. There are other reasons too why we might not remember our dreams, right? Dreams might not actually have a purpose. Dreams might be just like a free rider on that comes along with a brain that can think, perceive, and act when we're awake. Um, and so why would we need to remember them, right? Why do we dream in the first place, though? I think is the more interesting question, which we will get to shortly. I think we'll go on for another few minutes, another few minutes before taking a break. I want to come back to this idea of dreams and their association with the supernatural and the paranormal, right? A lot of ancient societies believed that dreams were divine in origin. And since this is a philosophy course, I think we have to start with the ancient Greeks, right? Um, Homer, the poet Homer, or Homeros in the Iliad and the Odyssey, names the god of dreams Honeiros. And so Oneiros it can refer to the god of dreams, who is like an anthropomorphization of dreams, a personification, if you like. Um, uh, or it can also refer to the dream itself. So Oneiros could be a figure that sends you Oneiroi, other little dreams that you have. And they might have symbolic or prophetic importance, right? And usually he's doing this at the request of some other god, right? Zeus or Apollo says, "Hey, I need you to send Achilles a dream." Oneiros is like, "No problem. I'm gonna take care of it." And then Oneiros goes and appears to, Achilles or Nestor or whoever as somebody in a dream, right? Or Hesiod, who is responsible for the Theogony and the works and days. He tells us that Oneiros is the child of Nux or Nyx, that is night, and Hypnos or Hypnos, which is sleep. And other cultures kind of follow this tradition, right? The Romans, who were closely, geographically and culturally pretty close to the Greeks. It's not like all the Romans just appropriated all the Greek stuff, right? Jupiter is not just Roman Zeus. Jupiter is his own god. But Jupiter and Zeus kind of descend from the same, Proto-Indo-European language and religion. So that's why the similarities are there. Um, I'll come back to that whole how long have we gone without sleep thing there in the chat in a moment. But the Roman poet Ovid tells us of three Oneiroi, which I mentioned actually previously in the introductory lecture. We've got Morpheus, Phobator, and Phantassos. You're probably thinking to yourself, Roman, but this is Greek. Yeah, well, he's writing in Greek, right? Because that's fancy. You know how Latin is kind of it less so now. But Latin used to be considered kind of like a scholarly language. If you were an educated person, right, like if you were in the Enlightenment, if you were like an Enlightenment philosopher, you would have probably read Latin and in addition, likely Greek. Um, If you were a scholastic philosopher in the Middle Ages, you absolutely would have read Latin, right? But Ovid is writing in Greek because what Latin is to us, Greek was to the Romans. Yeah, so this is in his big poem, The Metamorphosis. He tells us of these three Oniroi. Morpheus, who appears as a human, deals with truth. Phobator, who's kind of like Phobator from Phobos, fear, and Phantassos from, it's kind of related to like fantasy or appearance. Um, in the Abrahamic tradition, right, if you look into the Old Testament, there's a lot of dream stuff, particularly in the book of Daniel, right? Daniel is a prophet who interprets the dreams of King Nebuchadnezzar. So Nebuchadnezzar is telling him his dreams, and Daniel is saying, okay, so here's what this means. That means your kingdom is going to fall, right? So he's interpreting the dreams of King Nebuchadnezzar. Other traditions too. One thing I don't really talk about here, just because it's really owing to my lack of knowledge, but in a lot of indigenous traditions, dreams are given, you know, uh, dreams are very important. Dreams might contain messages from gods or spirits. Um, for example, when European anthropologists started to study the Aboriginal folk of Australia, they named I don't know of the word in the original language, but they identified this concept they seem to have called the dream time, which is kind of like I guess another way to translate the indigenous word is everywhen. It's kind of like a magical place where all of the gods and ancestral spirits are. So there's obviously some importance to that. We've even had scientific breakthroughs that have been accredited to dreams that people have had. For example, Kekule was the discoverer of the hexagonal structure of the benzene molecule. And he claimed that he was inspired to make this discovery because he had a dream of an Ouroboros. An Ouroboros is a representation of a snake eating its own tail. So he had this weird dream of an Ouroboros, and when he woke up, he thought, what if the benzene molecule is hexagonal? It goes around, more or less in a circle. Did some research and confirmed it, which is really cool. What about you? Have you ever had what you could describe as an anomalous experience, a spiritual experience, or perhaps even some form of inspiration in a dream? Perhaps you might even use your dreams if you're a skilled lucid dreamer. You might use your dreams for coming up with ideas or for rehearsing things. Sports psychologists, for example, have done a lot of research into the power of visualization. And it turns out that visualizing can help improve your athletic skills. So imagine, for example, I am trying to really perfect my basketballing. I don't know what it's shoot. I'm shooting. See, I don't know sports, but I want to get better at shooting the basketball. I can practice that in the gym, but when I'm done in the gym, I can also go home and visualize myself doing it. And it's been shown that that's made a difference, or that can make a difference in terms of athletic skill. And some skilled dreamers will practice in their dreams, right? And that helps even more. That's like a even more rich form of visualization, if you like. Um, Lena says, I feel like my dreams are precognitive sometimes. So cool. That's certainly I would say that's an anomalous experience for sure. Jamal says they've got inspiration. Many a story idea has come to me in a dream. Yeah. Yeah, okay, so you feel like you're in ancient Greece and the fates are talking. Yeah. The fates or the muses? Because the muses, maybe Oneiros sends the muses, because the muses are the sources of inspiration, right?
Yeah, I met muses.
Yeah, no problem. Um, yeah, Calliope maybe is talking to us in our dreams and inspiring something. Totally cool. Totally something the Greeks would have countenanced. Like, oh, you got inspired in a dream? Well, okay, well, some god or spirit helped you with that. That's just how it works, right? Zach, again, yeah, precognitive dreams, I would say. Um, I should say, obviously, I'm a skeptic. I don't believe that precognitive dreams are, violating the rules of cause and effect and time and space, but if you do seem to have one, that's an anomalous experience, right? Oh, neat. Bell came up with some code for a first year class, and that is really cool. So did Quan. That is so cool. Actually, I love that. Leo says, when my boss was pregnant, I had a dream that she showed up to work with her newborn, and then that same morning she texted me she had just given birth. But I think I probably just woke up early, saw the text, fell back asleep. That's possible. It could also be coincidence, right, Leo? I mean, remember the example in one of the other chapters from Blackmore's book that we looked at on the paranormal? About the man who had a dream that his friend was killed in a car crash. He dreamed about her in a hospital and dying in the hospital, and he wakes up to the news that she was killed in a car crash. And then that mathematician ran the numbers and found that the odds of somebody having a dream of someone dying, or the frequency of someone having a dream of someone dying and then waking up to the news that that person had died occurs roughly every 2 weeks. Now that's in the UK, um, where they have a population of I don't know, what is it, like 60, 70 million, something like that. I don't know what the frequency of such an occurrence would be here or in the United States, but I imagine the greater the number of people, the better the chances of something like that occurring. So it could be a coincidence, or maybe yeah, you read the text and forgot and fell asleep. Holly says, though awake and concentrating when I competed in figure skating during one competition, I stayed up late in my hotel with my solo music in my headphones and replayed over and over again my doing my routine perfectly. During my skate the next day, I experienced that flow state, that slow. Yeah, okay, so that's peak performance. We call that peak performance or a flow state. I won gold. Congratulations. I don't know if one has anything to do with the other. My sleeping dreams are really just ridiculous, no real agency. Like I'm sailing in Florida and I'm just okay with knowing I'm retired. It's not a bad dream to have. Retired in a condo in a nice warm place. Um, I would wager that your visualization exercises um probably helped. Probably helped with that, right? I myself, nothing really spectacular to report. I just think dreams are interesting, and I guess really, again, this is kind of anecdotal, kind of personal, but I think that my interest in lucid dreaming, which really began with that one episode of Star Trek Voyager. So I know there are some Trekkies in this class. If you've seen it, you know the one I'm talking about. But there's an episode of Star Trek Voyager where these aliens are making the crew of the Voyager fall asleep. Um, I guess because they think they're a threat, right? And these aliens, they exist. They sleep most of their lives, and they all live underground in these weird sleepy chambers and spend a lot of their times in dreams. But they have technology that if somebody they don't want shows up, it can make them fall asleep. And then the idea is they just sleep themselves to death, right? And then Commander Chakotay can have a lucid dream, so he uses lucid dreaming to figure it out and help the crew who are all stuck asleep. Kind of a funny episode. Uh, I forget what it was called. I think it was called Waking Moments. Yeah, Waking Moments. But anyway, that was the first time I had heard of lucid dreaming. And I thought, is this real? So I looked into it and I learned how to do it. Never was super good at it. But it was in learning about all of that that I really started to become interested in the mind. And I think that in a very consequential way, that was one of the things that led me to where I am now, studying philosophy and cognitive science. So that's kind of cool. But I considered myself a bit of an amateur onironaut, an explorer of the dream world. No inspiration or coming up with stories or code or scientific discoveries, but just exploring my own mind, I suppose, and learning about the mind in general. That's what I got out of it. So of course, for a long time, dreams were associated with the divine, the supernatural. They might have symbolic or prophetic importance. Probably the first modern account of dreams and dreaming is Freud's. There were actually people studying lucid dreaming prior to Freud and during Freud's lifetime, right? The Marquis d'Harvey de Saint-Denis was a lucid dreamer who was working a good while before Freud on this stuff. And of course, the term lucid dream was coined by the Dutch psychologist Frederick van Eden in the early 20th century. He coined that term and introduced the concept at a meeting of the Society for Psychical Research, in fact, which might be part of the reason why, for a long time, lucid dreaming was associated with psychical research and parapsychology and was not really taken seriously. But anyway, Freud's is one of the first big modern accounts. Freud kind of drops the divine importance of dreams, but retains an emphasis on their symbolic importance. And that's because Freud is a psychoanalyst, right? We've talked about this before, but remember that Freud's approach, his psychoanalytic approach, is to use a sort of talk therapy to uncover and reintegrate repressed elements of the psyche. So you have all kinds of things, according to Freud, that are repressed. Maybe, maybe you have the Oedipus complex or something, right? And that's repressed to prevent damage to your psyche. But it nonetheless returns from repression. And by doing psychoanalysis, maybe we can unrepress that thing and integrate it into the psyche in a healthy way. That's the idea, anyway. Um, you can read a lot about Freud's ideas in his book, The Interpretation of Dreams. Um, Here he explains that he thinks that dreams are kind of like a sort of wish fulfillment. So we have these unconscious desires that are repressed, right? And dreams are a way for us to fulfill those unconscious desires. But what our dreaming mind does is it censors them. So that's why I say Freud kind of dismisses the divine but retains the symbolic importance of dreams. It's to conceal the fulfillment of the wish. And it might not just be wishes, right? It could be fears, traumatic experiences, um, lots of stuff. And so, interpreting dreams for Freud was an important part of psychoanalysis. In fact, we've talked about the Oedipus complex before. It's probably not a real thing. Um, Freud here, I think, is drawing more from myth and classical literature than he is from science, right? Um, but that idea does actually come from that book, The Interpretation of Dreams. I don't know. What do you think? Do you think maybe your dreams are a sort of censored unconscious wish fulfillment? Or, if you want to forget about Freud, as many modern scholars of the mind do, not all, but a lot of people are, I think, actually rather unfairly dismissive of Freud. I mean, sure, there are complaints we can make about Freud. Freud does get a lot of the basics right, though, right? I think he's wrong about how the conscious and unconscious mind operates. I think he's absolutely right that our unconscious mind shapes us more than we're aware. He's absolutely right about that, but he kind of gets some of the details wrong, right? So I don't know if you're not cool with Freud, if you're not down with Freud, I understand that. But maybe you've tried to interpret your dreams. If so, how did you do it? I myself, I'll start. I haven't really, beyond what I said earlier in the lecture, right? Like if I wake up and I've had an anxiety dream, that usually what that is for me is a sort of realization that I've let things pile up and that I'm mentally overburdened and that I need to relax, maybe stop working and do something fun, right? So that's the extent of my dream interpretation. if you can call it that. But I'm wondering if any of you have made an effort to interpret your dreams. If not, no big deal. It is it is getting close to, well, it is 3:45. Why don't we break for 15 minutes and come back at 4? Perfect. Yeah. Oh, Zach does say, I think of dreams as a sort of readable reflection of my current emotional psychological client. It's not climate, not necessarily one-to-one symbolic, but I like to think about what might have made me dream about one thing or another. Yeah, yeah, that sounds kind of like that meshes with how I understand how to understand dreams. Absolutely. Thank you. Yeah, let's take a 15-minute break. So we'll resume at 4. Um, Yeah, Holly, that's true. Freud also was the first to suggest stages of psychological development. Um, oftentimes, we're on break. Okay, we're on break, but I'll just say that oftentimes when we try and begin a new discipline, we do get things horribly wrong. I mean, think of medicine in the ancient world, right? Um, Leeches and fumigating various orifices and so forth. Like, come on, that doesn't do anything. Now, of course, modern medicine is very good. Not that there aren't problems here and there, but it's pretty good. Um, I think of Freud kind of like that. Like he's one of the first people to try and scientifically understand the mind. He's going to get a lot wrong, you know. And that's fair. Kayla says sometimes certain animals or bugs will be important. That makes sense. I often dream of different animals. Oftentimes they're animals where they should not normally be. But I'll say more about that when we come back. So, um, enjoy the break, everybody. Okay, everybody. I guess we should get started and finish the lecture off. Okay, so we left off when we were talking a little bit about Freud as the first sort of serious modern attempt to try and understand dreams. Oh, interesting. This comment from Zach. Analyzing each other's dreams. Interesting. Well, that's pretty cool, actually. I think if you feel if that's a good friend, you guys are good friends. If you're comfortable enough with one another that you're able to talk about what you're dreaming about, I think that's pretty cool. Yeah, we were talking about Freud. Another more modern understanding of dreams is that of Owen Flanagan. Flanagan says that dreams are evolutionary epiphenomena. That means they play no causal role in the mental. So just throwing a little bit more philosophy of mind at you. Epiphenomena are states that don't affect other states or don't cause other states. Usually we talk about epiphenomena in the context of like mind-brain supervenience. And what that means in a nutshell is that physical states, such as brain states, can cause mental states, in that mental states supervene on physical states. But mental states cannot cause physical states. They can't affect brain states. Uh, so you can think of epiphenomena as all effect, no cause, right? Everybody clear on that? It's kind of like, look, if I have brain state A, that might cause mental state M. Now, brain state A also causes brain state B, and brain state N supervenes on that. But M didn't cause N. A caused B and N. Otherwise, if mental states caused physical states and physical states caused physical states, that would be a case of causal overdetermination. Sorry, Holly, what do you mean? Intermediary? Like the mental states are an intermediary between physical states? It's not even a bridge. Um, I'll try and illustrate here. Let me get my little tool here. So let's say I have a mental state M. Now that supervenes on physical state P1. Now, this physical state is a brain state which causes this mental state. Actually, let's call it M1. And let's say that physical state 1 causes physical state 2. I'm sorry for my messy mouse work here. Mental state 2 supervenes on physical state 2. So this could be, I don't know, um, maybe I have a perception of my cup of coffee, right? And so I have some mental states that supervene on the physical state. So my neurons are firing in such and such a way that they're representing the coffee cup on my desk. And so I have a mental state, which is like a mental representation of the coffee cup. And maybe, a causal chain kicks in. I realize I'm getting sleepy. I'm a little thirsty. I've already got the belief that there's a coffee cup on my desk and I've got the desire to drink some of it. So I reach out and get the coffee cup. So now I'm reaching out and getting the cup. My neurons are firing, causing my arm to move, et cetera, et cetera. And I have this mental state like, oh, now I'm drinking that delicious coffee. M1 and M2 are each caused by the physical states. So P1, M1 supervenes on P1, P1 causes P2, and M2 supervenes on P2. But M1 doesn't cause P2, nor does M1 doesn't cause M2, nor does it cause P2. Because that means we would have two causes for one effect, and that would be causal overdetermination. And so M1 and M2 are epiphenomena. That's usually what we mean by this term. Flanagan means something a little bit different. Flanagan seems to mean that, as he says here, quoted in Blackmore, that dreaming came along as a free rider on a system designed to think and to sleep. Hobson agrees. Dreams don't really have a function, or if they do, it's not clear what that function is, but they can have effects. And this is not how we usually talk about epiphenomena. I would actually use different terminology than Blackmore does here in this chapter. I would use the term spandrel. Spandrel is a term that we owe to the evolutionary biologist Stephen Jay Gould. You might have seen him on that episode of The Simpsons, Lisa the Skeptic. Just actually, that's a pretty good episode for it's part of the golden age when it was good. Um, and it deals with paranormal phenomena, right? They want to build something, and they're excavating the site, but Lisa finds bones, and it looks like it's the bones of an angel, and everybody thinks it's an angel, and she takes the bones to Stephen Jay Gould for analysis because he just happens to be in Springfield for some reason. And it turns out the whole thing was faked by a company to promote their new shopping mall, right? Oh, Jay's seen it. Great. Yeah. So that was Stephen Jay Gould. He was playing the scientist in that episode. He introduced this idea, and what it means is it's a trait that was not selected for by evolution, but which is a byproduct of another trait that was selected for. So obviously, um, you can make an argument that um, traits like being able to perceive the environment, to think about it, to act within it, to represent it mentally, et cetera, et cetera. Those are all traits that were selected for. Likewise, sleeping, REM sleep, right? These are all traits. We can talk about them as traits. Dreaming is a trait, but it was not selected for by the pressures of evolution, of natural selection. Rather, it's just a byproduct of traits that were selected for. The same traits that give us these big, powerful brains that we have, right? And I think that it makes more sense to talk about dreams in terms of um, spandrels than in terms of epiphenomena, because epiphenomena, that word has a pretty specific meaning in philosophy of mind, right? So I would I would change the terminology here if I were Blackmore and the others. But maybe dreams do have a purpose, right? Anti-Ravonsuo's threat simulation theory, for example, says that whoopsie daisy says that dreams evolved to simulate threats and practice dealing with them. And as evidence, he points out that modern dreams include a lot more threatening events than we usually face. Humphrey's got a similar idea where dreaming is a sort of mental play. Um, this is a way of, well, talk about Revonsuo's idea. Think about this, right? You might have more anxiety dreams or nightmares than you would like with no identifiable reason. Um, your life is going good. You're not facing any threats. You're not in danger. You're not under stress, but you have a lot of dreams that involve threats to you. That could be an evolved capacity for dealing with threats we might face in the environment. And we don't have to remember our dreams for this to work, is the other thing. Likewise, if dreaming is play, right? Humphrey says dreaming represents the most audacious and ingenious of nature's tricks for educating her psychologists. That is us, not professional psychologists, but us. Um, um, I mean, play is how animals learn to do things, right? Again, take it back to your pets, right? If you had a puppy or a kitten and you watch them play a lot, what they're doing is, having fun, but they're also learning important skills, right? Cats, the play behavior of cats is very similar to the hunting behavior of cats. So by playing, cats learn how to hunt. Um, Dreaming might be like that. Dreaming might be a sort of uh, play that occurs within the mind while we're asleep in order to help us equip with not only threats, like Revonsuo's theory says, but all manner of things we might encounter in life. Then again, Hobson thinks that if dreams do have a purpose, it could be memory consolidation. Your memories don't stay the same. We've talked about this before, but your memories aren't fixed, right? They get semanticized over time. They also get consolidated over time. They get moved from temporal areas to other areas of the cortex. And dreaming might play an important role in this. You can think of this as kind of like defragmenting your hard drive, if you've ever done that. Maybe you haven't. Um, but when you defragment your hard drive, what you're doing is moving data around on your hard drive so that it's better organized. You're not necessarily deleting anything, but you're moving it around so that where it is on the physical disk changes so that it's better organized. I guess with the advent of what are they called? Solid state drives. I don't know if we do the same thing. But when back in the day when I was building my own PC and I still had a disk like a hard disk drive, I would often defragment it for fun, um, just to keep the computer running smoothly. Yeah, like Quan says, more a hard disk drive thing. I don't think it's really a thing for solid state drives because they're so much faster, right? Whereas a hard disk drive actually had to spin. The solid state drive doesn't have moving parts like that. So I guess nobody really needs to do that anymore. Ah, memories. Cool. Well, thanks, Quan. Yeah, good to know. Yes, Holly says less statistically probable scenarios played out if the brain is running a statistical model at all times. I'm trying to wrap my head around this. Ones that are rejected. You mean like if dreaming is a form of play? Um, I think the statistical modeling stuff is really more Like the brain works as a predictive engine while we're awake and while we're asleep. But one of the differences, and we'll talk about this in a moment, one of the differences is that when you're awake, your brain is trying to hypothesize about your physical environment, and it is an actual physical environment that's out there in the world. But when you're dreaming, oh, sorry, the optometrist is calling me. One moment, please. Hello, speaking. Sorry, everybody. Yeah, for threats. So the interesting thing here, yeah, your brain is like a predictive machine, a little scientist, I like to call it, always building hypotheses about what's going to happen. When your brain is doing this when you're awake, what it is doing is working with what's out there in the environment. When you are asleep, you are more or less cut off from the external environment because you're asleep. So all it has is internal stuff to work with. So I guess if there are particular threats on your mind, uh, you might dream about them more, right? Um, Beyond that, I think I would take a look further into Revansuo's theory, but I don't think dreams evolved specifically to deal with threats. I think each of these theories gets a little bit of the picture right. I think that Hobson's probably right when it comes to memory consolidation. I really like Humphrey's play idea, and of course that could include dealing with threats, but also other things, other novel situations, right? Like if you think about it, dealing with novel situations is incredibly cognitively expensive. Um, Slow deliberative thinking takes time. It takes a lot of energy, so it takes a lot of oxygen, and it takes a lot of blood sugar and stuff, right? Um, it's easier if we can automatize things, do them more or less automatically. Like Holly with your figure skating, right? When you're in a flow state, what that is automaticity, which you're capable of because you are an expert. You have mastered the behaviors that you need to do, and you can do them without thinking about them. If dreaming is a sort of play, maybe it's a way of gaining some of that expertise to save our cognitive resources when we meet something new, which may or may not be a threat, right? And the interesting thing is we don't have to be able to remember our dreams for any of this to work. It could just be the case that, if we're consolidating memories, if that's what dreams are about, well, we don't need to remember our dreams. The memories are being consolidated. If it's threat simulation or play, likewise, we don't have to be able to consciously like recollect the dreams themselves because what we're getting from them is not that. It's more like a skill that we're trying to build into long-term memory, kind of like long-term procedural memory, not episodic memory. Um, so that's a good segue for me to get into how dreams work. And I think there's an interesting theory that's been put forward by Stephen LaBerge, who was one of the pioneers of lucid dream research. So the brain, if you'll recall, is very active when you are in REM sleep. It's nearly as active as when you're awake, minus some activity in the frontal regions. That's because LaBerge argues the dreaming brain is doing what the waking brain is doing. It is representing your environment and you within that environment. So it's representing your body. It's also representing its own states, your mind's own states, and an environment. But you're not in contact with the external world, right? Sure, if there's a loud noise like your alarm clock, it will wake you up. And sometimes your alarm clock or other environmental stimuli can even be incorporated into your dreams. But usually what the brain's got to do is just work with what it's got. It doesn't have a lot of sensory information coming in from the outside world. So it uses information, internally stored information, internal mental representations to build these experiences. So if you think of your waking experience as an online mental representation, then dreams are offline or mostly offline mental representations. And just to be clear, is anybody uncertain of what I mean by mental representation? I always forget to include this in my slides whenever I randomly bring up mental representations. But perhaps some of you have seen this painting by René Magritte, the Belgian surrealist painter. There it is. Have you all seen this? Or maybe some of you have seen it. It's a famous painting. Yeah, a lot of you have seen it. Holly hasn't seen it. Well, now you have. And if you read French, or if you read the translation down at the bottom, you'll know that this means this is not a pipe. What? What? What does that mean? Of course it's a pipe. What do you mean it's not a pipe? Well, I'll tell you what he means. It's not an actual pipe, it's a representation of a pipe. Yeah, a painting. It's a way of representing a pipe. Your brain does this too. Your brain creates mental representations. It could be something relatively straightforward, like something you're perceiving, right? I'm looking at my coffee cup right now. Am I seeing the actual coffee cup? No, I'm not. That's a mental representation of the coffee cup that I'm having. I mean, think of it like this. If I hold my coffee cup up again, once again to the screen, so you can all see my coffee cup, it's got some chips in it. It has the letter J for Josh. It's kind of like a grayish color with little dark flecks in it. You can all see it. You can see the light shining off of it here. Are you seeing the coffee cup itself? No. You're seeing a representation of it on the screen. The camera on my computer has to take the light that's hitting it, that's reflecting off this cup, hitting the camera, turn that into a bunch of ones and zeros, beam it across the internet, where your computer then constructs a representation of me on the screen in this room holding this cup. The brain is doing the same thing. The brain is actively simulating your environment when you're awake. When you're dreaming, it's doing the same thing, but it doesn't have the external world to draw on because you're asleep. So what does it draw on? According to LaBerge, it could be anything unconscious that's active enough at the time you enter into REM sleep. Um, a lot of this might include memories or emotions. It could be memories of things that happened to you during the day. Freud actually has a term for this. He calls it day residue. Maybe I have a dream about dreams when I go to bed tonight. Why? It could be because I gave this lecture, right? That'd be day residue. Or emotions. If I had a really bad day, a really stressful day, maybe I'll have a dream about what happened to me. Maybe I'm working customer service and I have a nasty customer. And I dream about that customer again. Well, because I was thinking about it a lot, and those mental representations are still somewhat active as I'm falling asleep and as I reach REM sleep. Um, and from there on, it's a matter of association between active and inactive schemas, or what we would call concepts. A schema, a concept, mental representation, all sort of different words for the same thing, for mentally stored information, right? Concept's a little more precise, right? Like If I have a concept of something, what that is a mental representation of all of the, for lack of a better term, information that defines what that thing is. Let's go with something simple. Give me your concept of a guitar. A guitar. Rather like this one, right? Which I'm holding upside down, but you know, you might have a concept. Your concept probably doesn't look like this actual guitar. But tell me some things about guitars that you're drawing from your concept of guitars. Yes, a hollow wooden instrument with strings. Number eight shape, stringed instrument. Yep. What else? You need two hands to play. I mean, you don't blow into a guitar, right? You play it with your hands. Usually has six strings, but there are guitars with more strings. You've got seven strings, eight strings, nine strings, 12 strings. A Will's is good. A solid, semi-hollow, or hollow wooden body with a neck and typically six strings, electric or acoustic. Yeah, it has to be tuned. Now there's variations, right? Like with this guitar, you tune it here with these machine pegs, right? But this guitar, I'm sorry, I'm nerding out a little bit here. This guitar, you turn you tune by tuning these little thingies down here. I don't know if you can see them. This is my electric. It's hot pink, has a whammy bar. It has a handle, which is silly, but I love it. Um, the acoustic guitar is obviously acoustic. Both have six strings, right? All these things that we're listing off are kind of like necessary and sufficient conditions for being a guitar, which is kind of how typically philosophers have understood what concepts are. They're defined in terms of necessary and sufficient conditions. Now that's started to change. Now you start to see like well, it's really been changing for a while. Again, post Wittgenstein, in the 50s when Philosophical Investigations was published. But nowadays we talk more about cluster concepts. So there's no necessary conditions, just a list of sufficient conditions. So guitars are played with the hands, sure, but some might have six strings, some might be electric, some might be acoustic, some might be both. This one is actually both. It's an electric acoustic. So actually, you can see here where you put your guitar strap. That's also actually an audio jack, and it has controls here, right? So it's just a big long list of sufficient conditions, right? Basically, it's the same thing as what psychologists used to mean when they talked about schemas. They're like mental items, mental building blocks. Um, and if certain of these are active, along with maybe memories and emotions from the day or days prior, that's what your brain is going to use to construct an experience during REM sleep. So again, waking experiences are like online experiences because we're online in the sense that we have sensory motor contact with the world. But dreams are offline in the sense that we don't, at least not very much. That's also why when we're awake, our mental representations of the world tend to be pretty stable. Now, it's true, we should know this. It's true, we ought to know this after taking this class, right? That you can certainly misperceive things when you're awake, right? You can see a figure in the woods and then look closer and see that it's just a tree stump, right? Um, but for that split second, you thought you saw somebody. This is why, and I apologize if this was too silly. This is why I shared the clip of the dog door sketch from Tim Robinson. I just if it's not your cup of tea, I understand. It is very weird humor. I very much love it. I think it's hilarious. If it's not for you, I totally get it. But that whole sketch with the dog door, right? Okay, who watched that? If you haven't seen it, Oh, you watch it once a month? So you know what I mean, right? His neighbor sends a pig with a Richard Nixon mask through the dog door, but for a few seconds he sees this terrifying monstrosity where he doesn't know what it is, right? Like that that happens, okay? Yeah, the swing dancing is I think a callback to an earlier sketch where he's mad about his wife being flipped around by the swing dancer. I'm not sure which episode this all takes place in because it's all very short sketches, but um yeah, that was a callback to a different sketch. But the idea is, it's just a pig, but he sees this weird monstrosity where he doesn't know what it is and he thinks it's going to eat him. Um, that's a misperception. That happens all the time. But as soon as you realize it's a pig in a mask, you see it as a pig in a mask, right? That can happen when we're awake. And of course, we can have hallucinations and other weird phenomena like that. But beyond those sorts of exceptions, our experience of the environment when we're awake tends to be pretty stable. It's not like that when we're dreaming. That's why dreams are so wacky and inconsistent, right? Like when I'm in my dream house, one minute I'm in the living room, the next minute I'm at Carleton University, right? I'm like, what? When I wake up, I'm like, hey, I should have noticed that I was dreaming because one minute I'm in my dream house, the next minute I'm in class up at Carleton. But the reason why I can make that quick switch like that is because in my dream, I don't actually have to traverse any physical space to get anywhere. I can just be at Carlton, maybe because I've been thinking about it. That's one reason why dreams are so weird. And of course, because there's diminished activity in the frontal areas or the prefrontal areas of the brain, I don't notice that that's not normal, right? Like if I see something weird in a dream, um, I just kind of accept it. There's one account of a dream in one of Stephen LaBerge's books, actually, where somebody dreams about they're at a restaurant and there's a waitress there, and she has no nose. Now, in real life, if you saw somebody without a nose, you might wonder, I wonder how that happened. Like, look at that. That person has no nose. Was it an illness, an injury? I better not ask them. I don't want to be rude. But you try to like rationalize why there's no nose. And this guy in his dream just kind of says, "Oh, that waitress doesn't have a nose. Huh. Kind of makes her look a bit weird. But some waitresses don't have noses, so right? I've had weird dreams where my brain seems to explain things to me. Um, it seems to it's like my mind offers myself explanations for what I see in my dream, the absurdities I see in my dreams, and I simply accept. Um, and I simply accept what my mind tells me, right? Of course, this is not the only theory of dreaming. I think Daniel Dennett has an interesting theory that explains dreams. I don't necessarily agree with it, but I do think it's interesting. Daniel Dennett kind of calls this the cassette theory of dreaming. On his theory, um, dreams, or rather accounts of dreams, are the result of these instantaneous memory assertions that happen when we wake up. Yeah, yeah, that's a good word for it, Zach, actually. Like assumed realities, and you just kind of go with it, right? Like, yeah, I've had dreams where I'm working a different job, right? Or even my anxiety dream about missing the gig with the old band. And I'm like I'm pushing 40 and I'm a university professor and I'm late for the band. Yup, nothing weird about this at all, right? I just go with it. But yeah, Dennett's theory of spontaneous memory insertions. There's two processes Dennett theorized. There's a composition process which develops your dream during REM sleep, but it's not an actual experience. You're not actually having an experience when you're asleep. The other is the memory insertion process. It's as if when you're asleep, your brain is composing music and recording it onto a tape, but it's not actually playing it. Then when you wake up, the tape is popped in to the stereo. And when you recall the dream, that's like you're playing the tape. Or maybe some of you do music, right? Some people let's get a little nerdy here. Some people might have a device like this. This is a MIDI controller, and you can program musical instruments with it on your computer. The composition process is exactly what it sounds like. It's like I'm composing a little song, but I'm not playing the song from beginning to end and then listening back to it. Rather, I'm composing it. That's the part that happens in REM sleep. And then I only listen to it once I've awakened and popped in the cassette tape. Does that clarify the difference? I just want to make sure I'm explaining this clearly because Dennett's theory can be a little bit tricky to grasp. But the key takeaway is that for Dennett, dreams are not experiences. You don't have an experience throughout the course of REM sleep, which you later recall. Rather, during REM sleep, a dream is composed like one might compose a song rather than playing a song. And then when you wake up, it's like you have this cassette tape memory version of the dream that so you're recalling it as an experience even though it wasn't. Everybody clear on what I've said? I guess like Blackmore puts it, on Dennett's theory, there's nothing it's like to dream, but there is something that it's like to have had a dream. And this is a hallmark of conscious experience. There's a certain like what its likeness. There's a phenomenality to our experiences. Dennett is denying that this is actually part of what happens during REM sleep. He says it comes after. Blackmore also doesn't think that whether dreams happen this way or some other way, whether it makes a difference. I actually think it does make a difference. And I'll explain why shortly. I just want to make sure, does anyone have any questions about Dennett's cassette theory? Hopefully you guys know what cassette tapes are too. I didn't even think of that. Okay, good. Kalis understands. I'm surprised that lots of students, I always ask, you guys know what a cassette tape is? And yep, you always know. So if you don't remember anything about your dream, according to Dennett's theory of the dream, would the cassette be broken? No, just not inserted into the stereo. Well, I think Blackmore seems to think that functionally there's no difference between having a dream experience and recalling that experience versus having a dream composition and recalling it as an experience. I'm surprised she claims this because Blackmore is familiar with the lucid dreaming literature. And I think if we look into that, we can understand why there's actually a prediction that really Dennett's and LaBerge's, there are predictions that are made that we can actually test, right? So I'll say a bit about that now. This is the fun stuff. Lucid dreams. That's a dream where during the dream, you know that you're dreaming. And we've had reports of them since antiquity. But again, for a long time, scientists dismissed the possibility. Like I mentioned before the break, the term lucid dream was coined by the Dutch psychiatrist or psychologist Frederick van Eden in the early 20th century. He presented his work at the Society for Psychical Research. And maybe that had something to do with lucid dream skepticism. Another, and this is kind of what motivates Dennett's theory, is that in the 40s, 50s, and 60s, the prevailing consensus amongst philosophers was that dreams happen during sleep, and when you're asleep, you're unconscious. So just definitionally, dreams were not conscious experiences. A lucid dream is a conscious experience. You're aware, you're conscious of the fact that you're dreaming. But how could this happen when you're unconscious? It seemed like a contradiction, therefore, it seemed like an impossibility. Um, that could be why Dennett tries to explain dreams as spontaneous memory insertions and not as experiences. Maybe. Um, but of course, we know that lucid dreams happen, right? You might have had one. Who's had one? I know that some of you have mentioned that you have had them and that you are. I think I think I remember one student claiming they can do so more or less at will. Which, if so, lucky. I've always had to really practice at it. Actually, it's really funny. I spent years working on how to do it, and I'd have a couple a month, and then I stopped my efforts. I stopped writing my dreams down. I stopped making a concerted effort. And now I find that if I'm well rested, if I'm thinking clearly and I'm sleeping in and I make the effort, I can more or less have one when I want. So it's weird. Like I stopped trying hard and then it became easier. I don't know. Jay had one once during a fever. Yeah. Okay. I wonder if it was maybe a particularly intense REM period because if you're you have a fever, maybe you're in bed, maybe you're sleeping longer, you're having longer REM periods as you sleep. Maybe that's why it was like that. Kalis has had dreams where they know they're dreaming and follow the script or change it. Yeah, yeah. Yeah, actually, this is good because, I think it's an important point to clarify. Becoming lucid in a dream doesn't necessarily mean that you can then control the dream. It just means that you are aware that it is a dream. However, a lot of experienced lucid dreamers do develop some level of dream control, right? Bell's had a few by mistake. Yeah, sometimes it happens spontaneously. One of you might have one tonight just because you watched this, right? Leo almost had one. Oh no. So you had a dream character who was like, "You're not dreaming. You're crazy, Leo. You're not dreaming." That is insane. That's like your own brain gaslighting you. That's crazy. Freud would have fun with that one. I'll tell you that. He'd have fun psychoanalyzing you. Martha's had some. Oh, good question. So Sanadi asks, do lucid dreams happen because the prefrontal cortex is more active? That could be part of it. Yeah, that could be part of it. Perhaps by engaging in like certain practices for lucid dreaming, it could be very much the case that you're keeping your the neurological underpinnings of your critical faculties active enough that you can recognize that you're dreaming. And if I'm not mistaken, I think it's difficult to do fMRI studies on dreamers because it's really hard to sleep in a big noisy MRI machine. But if we could do those, I think what we would find is higher activity. Activity that looks more like maybe not the same level as a waking brain, but more so than when one is having a non-lucid dream in those prefrontal areas. Kaya says, happens sometimes, and for some reason that other people in those dreams get mad when I realize I'm dreaming. Really interesting. I've never really had that happen. When I realize I'm dreaming, I tend to interact with the dream characters as if they are characters. Not necessarily like NPCs in a video game, but I'm like, oh, hey, there's so and so over there. That's my dream version of that person. Hey, I'm dreaming. Haha, stuff like that. Um, yeah, yeah. Well, flying, yeah. The two sorry, but the well, not sorry. I don't know if this is suitable, but Apparently, the two most popular things to do in lucid dreams are flying and sex, right? Those are the two things that people do the most when they have a lucid dream. And I don't think the reasons are, the reasons should be obvious. I like to fly, but it's weird. I'm not good at it in a dream. And people do it different ways. Some people kind of like swim through the air. Some people do a Superman thing. I read a dream account of one person who used a special flying dream chair, right? Um, Zach, oh yeah. So if you realize you wake up right away, yeah. And there are techniques for staying awake or for staying asleep that you can use. You can read about online or in books. Um, oh, interesting, Kaya. I actually have dreamed about my phone. I know there's this sort of urban legend that we don't dream about our smartphones. I actually have dreamed about my phone, which is weird because I try not to use my phone very much. Yeah, punches are slow motion or super weak. Yeah. Me, sometimes if I'm running, for some reason, I'll be like, I'm not moving. Like it's really weird. Because there's no physics. It's just a mental representation that's not grounded in the actual physical environment, right? That's why dreams are so weird like that. That's also why clocks are hard to read, why text is hard to read. That's why you might look at your hands and have extra fingers, right? Um, yeah, mirrors can be weird. Um, well, I mean, I think these all don't work for the same reason. It's not really to do with the objects that they are. It's just to do with the offline nature of dreams, right? If I open up my moral psychology handbook right here, and I can read, okay, by John M. Doris in the Moral Psychology Research Group. All right, cool. I close the book, wait a few seconds, open it up. Up still says John M. Doris and the Moral Psychology Research Group. That's because this is an actual book. So right now, I know I'm awake, right? I know I'm awake. I know you can't really see this, but there you go. You can see it too. That's because there's an actual book with those words printed. They're not just going to magically change if I look away and look back. But if I'm dreaming, there is no book. So I open it up. It might say one thing and then say something else the next time I read it. The letters might be all jumbled up and moving around. I might not even be able to read it, even if the letters are there, because in a dream, there's no book. Who has seen The Matrix? That movie, The Matrix, by the Wachowskis, however you say it. Yeah, it's a great movie. Love it. You know the part when Neo is going to see the Oracle and there are all the candidates for the one who are there to speak with the Oracle. And there's this one little guy who's bending spoons with his mind. What does he say to Neo? Yes, there is no spoon. And that's how he's able to bend it. Same with your dreams. You're dreaming of the spoon? There is no spoon. Very cool. So, I don't know what that is, but I promise I will watch it after. So, for a long time, there was skepticism over the reality of lucid dreams, but they were independently confirmed right around the same time by Keith Hearn in 1979, who was working at the University of Hull in England, and by Stephen LaBerge in 1980, who was at Stanford. Each of them could have lucid dreams, although Hearn admits that he is not naturally inclined toward lucid dreaming. Keith Hearn, by the way, is a parapsychologist or was a parapsychologist. Stephen LaBerge is a psychophysiologist. So where Keith Hearn is a parapsychologist in the sense that we've already covered here in this class. What LaBerge does is study the mind body connection during sleep. So a psychophysiologist, mind, body, right? And they would get participants who were good at having lucid dreams to come into the sleep lab and to have lucid dreams and to conduct experiments. LaBerge calls them oneironauts, which means explorers of the dream world. Now, how did they establish that lucid dreaming was real? They both did a very similar kind of study. They both drew on the exact same finding that had been observed in a sleep lab prior. LaBerge and Heron each knew that when your eyes are moving around in rapid eye movement sleep, they're not moving randomly. They're actually moving according to where you're looking in the dream scene. This was actually discovered by chance, right? There was a patient in a sleep lab, and they were seeing the eye movements, which appeared more or less random. But all of a sudden, he started making regular left right saccades like this. And they thought, well, that's very strange. Usually the eye movements seem a lot more random. So they woke him up and they asked this participant, what were you dreaming about? And the participant said that they had been watching a game of table tennis in their dream, watching the ball back and forth across the table. So, what researchers like Keith Hearn and Stephen LaBerge did is they had their oneironauts make pre-established, non-random, agreed-upon movements with their eyes within a dream when they realized they were dreaming. They could detect these eye movements using the devices that they had available to them in the sleep lab. You know, you can even do it with an EEG. An EEG, although it's meant for measuring brain activity, will pick up the electrical signals from your muscles moving your eyes like this, right? Um, so basically, what happens is we get our own neuronauts into the lab, get them asleep. Once they're in REM sleep, we take a close look. Uh, when they realize they're dreaming, they'll make a signal. And the signal is something that's determined ahead of time by the researcher and the dreamer. They'll signal when they become lucid, and then they will signal when they begin engaging in some kind of dream experiment. Like, for example, the subjective passage of time. So while LaBerge is studying these lucid dreamers, one of the things he did is he looked at the subjective sense of how time passes. And so what he would do is have the oneironaut signal when they realize they're dreaming, when they begin the experiment. So the experiment might be to count to 10, 1 1,000, 2 1,000, 3 1,000, etc. And then make a signal again when they're done counting. The idea here is to see if your subjective sense of time in a dream is the same as how time passes when you're awake. And it is, by the way. People tend to estimate time about the same when they're awake versus when they're dreaming. So if I'm awake and I'm counting to 10, 1 1,000, 2 1,000, etc., I'll do it for about the same duration with the same level of accuracy as if I tried it in a dream. Very neat. Um, and I also think that LaBerge's work kind of suggests that Dennett's theory doesn't really capture what's going on because all of this is happening in real time. Yes, I understand that there are epistemological problems. Like I'm not ignoring those, right? There's a problem where, as a lucid dreamer in a lab having a lucid dream, there really is a sort of solipsism that you have to worry about in the sense that you are kind of in your own little world, and I have no way of knowing what's going on in your dream other than what you tell me. But then again, the same is true for everybody here when we're awake, right? It's a worry over solipsism. We all have the same worry. It's illustrated nicely, I think, by Wittgenstein's. I'm talking a lot about Wittgenstein today, but his little beetle in the box exercise. We all have a box, and in our boxes, we all have something we call a beetle. Oh, interesting, Jay. All dreams happen in 4 seconds and just feel longer. Yeah, that's definitely a myth. Because again, we know from looking at eye movements, which seem to occur in real time and which correspond to dream gaze. Um, where was I? Oh, beetles in the box, right. So what do I have in my box? I call it a beetle, you call yours a beetle, but we could all have something very different in our boxes. Maybe you have a rhinoceros beetle in your box. Maybe I have a dung beetle in my box. Maybe someone else has a Volkswagen beetle in their box. Someone else has John Lennon in his box, right? But we all talk about our beetles the same way and refer to them with the same word, right? That's the worry of solipsism, is that I could have something completely different in my mind than you, but we're talking about these different things with the same words. It kind of illustrates this worry. And it is there for dreams, but it's also there for everything else, right? And we don't actually behave like solipsists. Like the way we conduct ourselves, I don't treat you all like you're all robots or in a simulation or NPCs or whatever, right? Or if I'm dreaming, right? Like Descartes says, I judge that you are people with your own minds. And if you're a Wittgensteinian, one of the things that justifies you making that judgment is language. Language helps us not to have to worry about solipsism. In any case, I do think that LeBerge's work kind of shows that dreams do seem to be experiences happening in real time. And if you've had a lucid dream for yourself, I think it's pretty hard to deny that it is an experience. What about other kinds of experiences in the time that we have left? What about out of body experiences? This is when one has an experience of leaving the physical body, as if the soul has left the body, the ghost has left the machine. Now, not all out of body experiences happen when you're going to sleep or sleeping. Let's be clear about that. Some happen um some happen during moments of peak performance, for example. Oh, yeah, in surgery, that's a good example. Yeah, some people have weird experiences where they report, like if they're undergoing surgery, or maybe they have a near-death experience. Their heart stops for a minute or two, and some people will report this experience where they're kind of like floating above their body on the operating table. One interesting, um, one interesting account, I remember this was a long time ago when I still watched professional wrestling. But I was watching an interview. It was about the big cage match between Mankind and The Undertaker. I'm not sure if anybody knows who I'm talking about here. But I remember in an interview that The Undertaker claimed that during that match he had this out of body experience where it was like he was watching himself in this wrestling match fighting Mankind, Mick Foley. So it can happen during sleep, sure, but it can also happen, like Kaya says, if you're undergoing surgery, can happen. I think out of body experiences are also associated with near death experiences. Um, could happen during, yeah, peak performance or some other kind of altered state, right? Like I think I mentioned this previously, but Susan Blackmore herself had an out of body experience when she was smoking the pot. Yeah, she was smoking marijuana with her friends at university, and I guess it must have been some pretty good stuff, because she had an out-of-body experience. Zach says my aunt was legally dead for several minutes and supposedly saw her own body during the time she was dead. Freaky. That's freaky, man. But yeah, that's a near-death experience that has the same characteristics as an out-of-body experience. Now, um, Oh, interesting. Interesting. I have a friend who's like who tells me I should do DMT. I'm not going to. I'll tell you why. First of all, let me preface this. I know y'all are at that age when you're in university, and that's when you're growing up, becoming an adult, having new experiences, and obviously it's going to happen, right? I was once a university undergraduate student myself. Um, that said, be careful. I'm not your dad. I'm not going to tell you not to do drugs. I'm not going to tell you to do drugs. Be careful. Um, and if you are using substances and you want to stop, talk to health and counseling services. Okay. Because, sure, a lot of people use substances recreationally with no problems. Other people develop problems, like addiction, or perhaps there can be interactions with other substances. Yeah, that's where I was going, Kaya. It can trigger psychosis, likewise with cannabis, right? In fact, all hallucinogens, there is a risk of this. And especially when you are like Kaya says, a young adult and your brain is still developing, you want to be careful. Um, the reason I am not going to do DMT, well, one reason is that it's illegal. I know the internet exists. I know that you can get it. Um, Another reason is that I am on medication that does not interact well with that substance. I mean, I'm really pleased that Kaya had positive experiences. If I were to do that, I would run the risk of having a seizure, right? So if you're on any kind of, I'm on selective serotonin reuptake inhibitors, so it's a kind of antidepressant. I take a tolerance dose because, well, for various reasons. Um, but I'm on a tolerance dose, and I do not want to run the risk of having a seizure. Otherwise, people's experiences sound interesting to me, and um, yeah, I don't think it's neurotoxic. I don't think it's physically harmful, but it can interact with other medications. So obviously, like I said, I'm not your dad. I'm not going to tell you not to do this. I am certainly not going to encourage anyone to do it. And if anybody is using any kind of substance and you want to stop, there are resources available for you. Okay. Um, all of that said, oh yes, yes. Another thing is like I worked in briefly. I'm not tooting my own horn here, but I did work briefly at the supervised injection site downtown where I was a peer worker. I did it for about 3 months. Uh, I left because I got this job and I wanted to be a proper professor, not just a contract instructor juggling other work, right? So I had this opportunity and I took it. Otherwise, I would probably still be there. But one of the big things there is harm reduction. That's the whole point of these supervised injection sites. Harm reduction. Clean drug paraphernalia. If somebody has an overdose, we can reverse that overdose with Narcan, right? One thing is it's all supervised with nurses and peer workers. And we tell people, if you're going to use a substance like an opiate, go there. Don't use alone, right? Same with this. I mean, you're not going to have the same reaction that you would to fentanyl, but if you have a seizure or a psychotic episode, you do not want to be alone, right? So, definitely, I'm not encouraging any kind of substance use, but I am a big advocate for harm reduction, and I know that university students try things, so be safe, okay? And if you don't want to use substance, if you're using it and you want to stop, I cannot emphasize this enough. There are resources available to you. Addiction is not a moral failing. Addiction is a disease that can be treated. Okay? just in case there's anybody out there watching this who is stuck somewhere they don't want to be, okay? But yes, you could have an out of body experience in an altered state. I think also like maybe people who try those sensory deprivation experiences, when you go in a sensory deprivation chamber where it's dark and you're just kind of floating in the water. I think some of those people might also have out of body experiences. But for the out of body experiences that occur during sleep or before or leading into or out of sleep, I think that they are likely dreams. Oh, yeah, I passed out one time. I'm glad somebody was with me. Um, I was I was in the kitchen and I was grabbing a snack from the fridge. I had some donuts that I had taken home from work, and I was really, really hungry. And I was eating those donuts too fast, and I think I didn't choke, but I kind of got short of breath and maybe aspirated a little bit of the donut. And my vision was going like this. And I started like I found I couldn't keep my balance and the next thing I knew, my partner was in front of me. I was on the floor. And my partner was like, Josh, are you okay? And I'm like, huh? What? What am I doing on the floor? Right? Um, Very strange experience. Not one that I would want to go through again. Luckily, I didn't choke and I had somebody there who was able to make sure I was okay. This was not a drug related thing. It was a donut related thing. A donut of death, as Fern says. Yeah, it was scary after because I didn't know what was going on. I was watching this documentary, a little, well, kind of documentary, part documentary, part puff piece for the Air Force. Whatever. I like airplanes, and I was watching this new film on Netflix about the Thunderbirds. They're the demonstration team for the Air Force. They fly the F-16s and they go around to air shows and do all the cool stuff with the airplanes. And they featured a man who was a former pilot who was I think the last person to pass away, the last member of that demonstration team to pass away. He passed out by going into something called G-lock, which is when you're flying, you're hitting high G's, and all of the blood runs away from your head. And unfortunately, this pilot passed out and crashed right into the ground. Could not pull up because he was not conscious. So, you know, if there's a risk of passing out, you don't want to be doing anything dangerous, right? Super scary. But anyway, Lynn Levitin and Stephen LeBerge think that out of body experiences are like dreams or related to them. At least I say when it comes to those that occur when we're sleeping. They're related to false awakenings. You ever have a dream that you've woken up only to find out that you haven't woken up when you actually are woken up by your alarm clock or something? That's called a false awakening. So a false awakening is when you're having a dream and you dream that you have woken up. I've had one or two. Oh, weird. So when you had the fever dream, which was lucid, you had a bunch of false awakenings, Jay. Very interesting. Fern calls them layered dreams. Yeah. Yeah, it's like taking the same test, right? It's also a trope you see in certain movies. Like you see a character who's having a bad dream and then they wake up only to realize that they're still dreaming. So it's a trope you see and a real phenomenon that happens. Um, they might be a result of sleep paralysis, not false awakenings, but out of body experiences. The sensation that you are leaving your body could actually be related to other episodes that people experience during sleep paralysis, like incubi, succubi, alien abductions, ghosts. Um, yeah. I think that's the most likely explanation, at least when it comes to out-of-body experiences that occur when we're sleeping or when we're going to sleep or waking up. When it comes to the altered states ones or the peak performance ones, there's probably a different explanation, which I unfortunately I don't think we have this time to explore here. But at least when it comes to, when you're falling asleep and waking up, those out of body experiences are probably dreams. And we can test this, by the way. We can set something up in the environment and we can say, okay, you're in the sleep lab, induce an out of body experience, and go tell us what we've hidden over there on the roof or whatever. And if they get it right, that's good. If they get it wrong, probably just a dream. Huh, yeah, vivid. Those dreams must be vivid if the experiences are if you have to remind yourself that those weren't real. See, maybe this is why it's hard to remember our dreams, right? Gets back to that idea that maybe it would be maladaptive if we remembered our dreams too much. I had one classmate one time. He was acting all kind of cold with me, and it wasn't like he was being mean, but I could just tell something was up. Um, and then later in the day, he said to me, like, I had this dream where you were being a real jerk to me. And I was like, oh, that sucks. And I wonder like if that memory of me being a jerk in the dream was making him act a little bit differently. So maybe. Yeah, maybe Zach. Um, yeah, forgot if it was a dream. I've had when I was a kid, I would sometimes wake up from a dream and think it was real until I fully woke up. Same with Bell, but maybe a side effect of medication. Yeah. Oh yeah, Holly. That's another aspect of peak performance. Time can appear to move faster or slower. Um, and that's because you're less consciously engaged with what's happening because what you're doing relies on your expertise. For me, it was the opposite. Like when I played in the band, the same one I have dreams about, um, a 15 song set would go by like that. Like just it was crazy. Like it would feel like it was seconds sometimes. It was so weird. Um, yeah. Oh yeah, maybe Will. Yeah, sounds like what was going on with my friends. If you want to try and safely induce an out-of-body experience, I recommend you do so with some of the same techniques for inducing lucid dreams, which we will briefly um, go over shortly. But just to try and begin wrapping things up, we don't know why we dream. Like I said earlier, I think that um, each theory has a little bit of the picture right. Maybe dreams don't serve a purpose, but I think that's doubtful. I think it's probably true that they're important for memory consolidation, maybe as a sort of mental play, which might include responding to like rehearsing threat responses. Um, I don't think they're an epiphenomenon in the strict sense. They might be spandrels, a sort of free rider on a brain that can perceive, think, act, and so forth. But it seems strange to me to suppose that they have no purpose at all. But in any case, they're certainly not epiphenomena in the strict sense because they can affect us. If you have a bad dream, it can affect your mood the next day. If you have a really great dream, it might affect your mood, right? Let's say you want to have lucid dreams, though. Here's how you get started. One thing you've got to do is improve your dream recall. You also have to make a habit of doing something called reality testing. You should practice good sleep hygiene too. Make sure you're getting enough sleep. Make sure you've got a regular sleep schedule. Don't be don't be falling asleep on this, right? Because the light from your screen can keep you awake. And you might want to use certain specific techniques like these ones. For the basics, though, one thing you've absolutely got to do is get better at remembering your dreams and at learning. You have to learn what is dreamlike about your dreams. So, um, the received wisdom on how to do each of these things is firstly to keep a record of your dreams. You want to write them down. If you're not good at recalling dreams right away, don't worry. Try to get into the habit of remaining still when you first wake up, remaining relaxed, and just kind of seeing what you can recall. You don't want to get up right away because when you get up and start becoming active, you start forgetting things. So you want to remember as much as you can. And then you want to write it down. You could write it on your phone. You could dictate it into a recording device on your phone. You could type it up on your computer, whatever works for you. When I was young, I used notebooks rather like this one, right? I would give each one, like a date, a title. I'd write down sometimes nothing more than a few sentences, sometimes pages, depending on what I could remember. Sometimes I'd remember things throughout the day. Sometimes when I climb back into bed, something would come back to me. I'd write that down too. And you'll find that you get better as you do this exercise, you'll get better and better at remembering your dreams. Then you need to learn what is dreamlike about your dreams. Stephen LaBerge calls these dream signs. So once you've got about 2 weeks worth of dream records, you want to look back and see what kind of regular dreamlike things there are in your dreams. And then you want to make a list of those. For me, one might be my dream house, right? Or the band that I was in. Maybe every time I dream about it, but maybe I also sometimes look at old pictures from when I was in the band. Um, Strange creatures where they shouldn't be is another thing dreamlike about my dreams. So now that I have a list of those dream signs, what I'm going to do is start doing reality testing or critical state testing whenever I see something in real life that reminds me of my dreams. So, if I'm dreaming of the band, maybe when I see my guitar, I'm going to ask myself, could I be dreaming right now? And then there's a lot of ways to do that, right? A good one is to try and read something. Could be a clock, could be text. Read it, look away, look back. If it's the same, you're awake. If it changes or if it's hard to read, you could be dreaming. Try flicking a light switch on and off. If it works, you're probably awake. If it doesn't, it could be because you're dreaming or because you need to call an electrician. Um, Look at your hands. In a dream, your hand representations are not caused by your actual hands. Remember, dreams are offline rather than online. So sometimes in dreams, people have extra fingers. Another fun one that you can do is plug your nose and try to breathe through your nose like this. If you're awake, you won't be able to do it because your nose is actually plugged. Don't be careful, right? Don't go nuts and pop your ears, right? Just like a little can't breathe, I'm probably awake. You're dreaming and you plug your nose, you will have the curious experience of breathing through your nose while it's plugged. Why? Well, because you're asleep and your nose is not actually plugged. So there's all kinds of little ways you can do reality testing. And what you want to do is do that every time you see one of your dream signs in waking life. And that way you'll get better at remembering your dreams and at remembering to perform reality tests. And the idea is eventually this becomes a habit. So one of these days you're going to be dreaming, you're going to notice something weird, ask yourself if you're dreaming, and realize that you are. But maybe you want a little extra assistance. Well, you can do any number of techniques. One is mnemonic induction of lucid dreams, which basically has to do with memory cues. So, this is best after you've been sleeping for a while, like maybe you've woken up before your alarm goes off. You wake up, remain in bed, try and remember your dream, and then stay there, try and fall back asleep while replaying the dream in your imagination. But this time, as you're reenacting the dream in your imagination, you imagine yourself noticing something weird and thereby recognizing that you're in a dream. And this is tricky. You've got to keep focused on doing this, but not so focused that you wake yourself up. So if your mind wanders, just calmly refocus your efforts, but keep reimagining the dream, only this time you realize it's a dream. And keep doing this until you fall asleep. And if all goes well, you'll find yourself in a similar dream, or perhaps a different dream, but you'll notice that you are dreaming. You might even say something like, "Oh, I was just falling asleep and now I'm in my weird dream house. Oh, I'm dreaming, of course." Right? And then you go and do whatever dream stuff you want to do. That's the mild technique or mnemonic induction of lucid dreaming. You can also try waking induced lucid dreams where the idea is you're trying to enter a dream somewhat directly. The way I do this is with counting. So instead of using mild and rehearsing a dream, what you can do is count yourself to sleep. Do this again after you've been asleep for a while and you're going back to sleep, or maybe when you're having an afternoon nap if you're really sleepy. I'll count silently in my mind. One, I'm dreaming. Two, I'm dreaming, etc., etc. And if it works, you'll find yourself in a dream continuing on to count, 75, I'm dreaming. 76, hey, wait a second, I am dreaming. And then, boom, lucid dream. That's not the only way to do it. You can also watch your hypnagogic imagery. As I said earlier, these are the sort of closed eye visual impressions you get as you're falling asleep. Sometimes they're flickering lights and blobs. Sometimes they're geometric patterns. But you can maintain your sort of wakefulness by observing them passively while your body falls asleep. And then what you actually do is enter the dream consciously. This is tricky to do. I've never managed to do it. For me, the counting technique works very well, but some people are able to do this. And if it works for you, great. I actually had a friend when we were working on lucid dreaming in high school, right? My friend group. My one friend tried the counting technique, and he told me about it on the bus ride to school. I lived in the country, of course, and had to get up at like 5:30 in the morning to catch the bus. Um, so we had a lot of time to talk on the bus. So he's telling me about this dream. He says, I've tried the counting method. I said, what happened? And he said, well, I was going to sleep. One, I'm dreaming. Two, I'm dreaming. And then I had a dream where I was in math class. So my friend tells me, like, so I'm sitting at my desk and he's counting, but by writing it down, like one, I'm dreaming, two, I'm dreaming. And then he says the teacher comes over and says, John, are you trying to have a lucid dream? And he goes, yeah. And then the teacher says, you're supposed to be doing your math, not lucid dreaming. And it's like, oh, okay, I'll get back to my math homework. And he told me this, and we were both like, oh, it like almost worked, but your dreaming brain tricked you. So that's funny. But with practice, it can work. Another technique is called the wake back to bed method. And this takes advantage of how, well, all these techniques take advantage of how your REM periods get longer as the night goes on. Uh, but this one plays on the fact that this can happen even if you get up for a little while. So Alan Worsley, the Onironaut who worked with Keith Hearn in the UK, uses this method. What he does is he gets up after, 7 hours or so, stays awake for a little bit, and then goes back to bed. Um, Hopefully you have a big long REM cycle that's coming up during that little I won't call it a nap, but you could think of it as a nap that's very close to your regular sleep time, or a snooze if you like. So you should be up and awake and alert, but if you're able to fall back asleep, you'll still get that nice long REM cycle. And when you're going back to sleep, you can do mild or wild or whatever technique you think is the most helpful. And hopefully you'll end up in a nice long dream, which will, if you're not lucid already, give you more of an opportunity to become aware of the fact that you're dreaming. So those are some methods. You can read more about those all over the internet. There are a lot of thriving lucid dreaming communities on the internet, but watch out for the nonsense. Um, I think unfortunately, even though the scientific reality of lucid dreaming has been established, there is still a lot of woo-woo, a lot of flim-flam out there. So just watch out for that. But I highly encourage you to try and have a lucid dream. It is, as I started the lecture by saying, one of those things that was, previously was not believed to be a real phenomenon and was studied by psychical researchers and parapsychologists and has now been established as a real phenomenon. And with that, it ceased being paranormal or parapsychological and just became a part of ordinary psychology. But more importantly, lucid dreams are cool. They're neat. Isn't it crazy that your mind can create this experience while you are asleep in bed? Amazing. And maybe by studying dreams, we can learn more about ourselves and about how our minds work and how consciousness works. So, this was our second last lecture, and next time is our final lecture. I cannot believe how fast the time has gone. But I've had such a fun time with this class. I always do. This is a great course to teach. What we're going to do next time is look at the results of the participation elements 1 and 2. So I'm going to get that second participation element set up today. It's just going to be just like the first one. And what I want you to do is complete it by Friday. And then we're going to compare the results and see if any belief changes have taken place. I'll also offer some concluding remarks, and we can have a little discussion if you have any questions about the essay assignment, anything like that. So thanks, everybody. That's all I have for today. I hope you have a good weekend. I will get the participation element set up right now. I know I'm a little late getting to this, but it's been a busy summer. But yeah, I'll get this set up. Enjoy your weekend, the rest of your week. Thank you, everyone. And I will see you on Monday for our final lecture. Thanks. Take care.